Hi there, students. I'm XS. That's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, because that is what I am. I'm a Puppy-sensei, and I make Japanese content to help you level up your abilities. Today we're going to spend some time discussing a grammar pattern that allows us to say that one thing resembles another thing. You might remember last week we were using the poi grammar pattern, which can also describe something as seeming like another thing, although usually unexpectedly seeming like it. Today we're going to be learning mitai, okay? We're actually going to talk about mitai in 3 different environments, and those are mitai da, or mitai desu, mitai na, and mitai ni. All 3 of these basically mean that something is similar to something else, but the difference between them is all about whether the grammar pattern is being used in place of a verbal unit, being used as an adjective describing a noun, or being used as an adverbial unit. Seems to me that we're going to best understand these 3 different use cases through some example sentences, so let's start with this one. Okay, here's our sentence, and I think at first glance, maybe this sentence feels like a little bit harder than it actually is. Saikin no tenki, the weather recently, saikin no tenki wa sugoku samui, really cold. Fuyu mitai da. Fuyu mitai da. It's like winter. I think we should treat these as in 2 entirely different thoughts, okay? So the core thought here is actually that the weather is very cold, right? Saikin no tenki wa sugoku samui. Lately, the weather is very cold. But how cold is it? Well, it's cold like winter. Fuyu mitai. Yeah, cold like winter. Cold to the degree that it feels like winter. Now, that might remind you a lot of what we did last week. We were looking at the poi grammar pattern, which I described as kind of like a segment that tends to relate 2 things to one another, with poi attaching to a noun to say that some other noun has very similar qualities. And what we see with mitai here really does feel the same, because it's been so cold lately, so it feels like winter. Okay? But the important difference here is that it might actually be winter in the case of this sentence. Because you might actually have like a really unseasonably, not seasonably warm, but an unseasonably warm winter. And then finally, the weather turns and it gets cold. And then you say the sentence, Saikin no tenki wa sugoku samui. Fuyu mitai da. Meaning like, wow, it finally feels like winter because it's actually getting super cold, right? So this fuyu mitai da structure, this fuyu mitai, just means seems like winter. So it could be winter or it could not be winter. It just seems very winter out right now. Okay, another example that I see a whole lot, see this all over the place, is something like this. Ima, ureshii, yume mitai da. That yume mitai, it feels like a dream. Here we're using mitai to say that something feels as though it's a dream. And again, I'm going to repeat, this could be a situation where you are actually dreaming, couldn't it? Right? You can quite clearly have a case where you might be in the dream saying, oh crap, this feels like a dream, pinch me to see if I wake up or something. In other words, mitai is a grammar point where you're simply stating that something seems or feels one way, right? So maybe you work for a company and it seems like it's very busy lately. Kaisha wa isogashii mitai. The company seems very busy. Maybe somebody seems very, very quiet. So you could say something like, Kanojo wa shizuka mitai. The girl seems very quiet. Perhaps you want to say that it looks like rain outside. Soto ni ame mitai. Looks like rain. Or maybe you feel like your teacher looks a little tired. Sensei wa tsukarette iru mitai. Are you noticing how versatile this kind of mitai form is? Well, in truth, it really is so versatile that we are not even going to be able to cover everything today, and that's okay. But please take note that even just in these 4 examples, we're using mitai to describe some kind of situation as being like an e adjective, right? Isogashi mitai with an e adjective, like a na adjective, shizuka mitai, like seems very quiet, like a noun, ame mitai, seems like rain, and also like a verb, tsukareteiru mitai, ne, seems tired. As I said, that makes this mitai unit very, very versatile. So let's start by defining the rules for use that are going to apply to this style of mitai sentence. When used with a noun, we can simply tack mitai onto the back of any noun, and thereby we create a sentence where one thing seems like another thing. Very similar to how we used poi. So, yume mitai means like a dream. Nihonjin mitai means like a Japanese person. VTuber mitai means like a VTuber, etc. Na adjectives are technically nouns, so we can just do the same thing here. We can treat them as if they're nouns. We use the noun form of the na adjective, the form without the na, and then we add mitai, ne? So we can say something that is some particular way, like konran mitai, it seems chaotic. E adjectives just have mitai added to their e form, like kawaii mitai, seems cute, or oishii mitai, seems delicious. Verbs are just a little bit more complicated. For mitai, when used with verbs, we end up with sentences that mean something like doing something to a certain degree, or seeming to be in some particular way or some particular state. So my example before was this one. Sensei wa tsukareteiru mitai. It's a perfectly okay sentence. It just means sensei looks tired. It's a te-iru sentence where sensei is being described as currently in the state of being sleepy or tired or worn out or something like that. Now, we actually can use this same structure with active verbs as well, right? So here's another sentence. Benkyou shinai to seiseki wa waruku naru mitai. Basically, mitai here is kind of following the plain present form. You can also use it with the plain past form of a verb to create a situation where it seems as though some verb is going to be accomplished, was accomplished, or is currently in the state of being accomplished. However, when it comes to tense, we really should explore this for a moment because I think tense in Japanese is really, really, really cool. Okay, so the thing that I want you to take note of here is that we can conjugate either the verb that comes before mitai, or we can conjugate the copula after mitai to create some different situations that scope over different periods of time. Okay, so our first sentence, seiseki wa waruku naru mitai, means that it seems like my grades might go down under some circumstance, like not doing your homework. The second one, right, we're conjugating the verb before mitai. Seiseki wa waruku natta, past tense, became bad. Waruku natta mitai, ne? That means it seems like my grades already went down. So maybe you didn't do your homework, and as a result, it seems like your grades have fallen. And then finally, seiseki wa waruku naru mitai deshita. This is conjugating the copula after mitai. That puts the entire sentence itself into the past tense. So it creates a situation where it had previously seemed to be the case that your grades would go down, right? Mitai deshita. It seemed that way. Maybe it seemed that if you didn't do your homework, your grades were going to go down, and then you didn't do your homework and nothing happened. Nothing bad happened. Your grades stayed just as good as they were before. Something like that, right? So it only seemed to be some certain case, but it ended up just not being that case. Or maybe it ended up being exactly that case. It only seemed in the past to be that way, and whether it did or didn't come to pass or come to fruition that way, that, that isn't really addressed in the sentence. But those are kind of the things that we can do as we're conjugating these things. Yeah? I hope all of that makes good sense, but I really want to quickly move on to mitai ni and mitai na. Okay, so in English, we have a really handy class of word called an adverb. And while Japanese also has words and phrases that act adverbially, it's not really usually as cut and dry for the Japanese language to create sentences that allow us to very easily describe how we do some certain verb. But the mitai ni form is one of the handier cases that allows us to do just that. So when mitai ni precedes a verb or an adjective, it kind of describes that thing that you're doing in a very specific way, right? It describes the verb. Let's look at an example. メネージャー様はプロみたい動画を編集します。Yeah? So this means manager-sama edits videos like a pro. Now, I want to draw a distinction here and say that this is a little bit different from using the poi structure, because with poi, a sentence using poi like this would imply that manager-sama is not a pro. But pro mitai, you seem like a pro, but that doesn't make a value judgment on whether or not you are a pro. Yeah? You could very much be very much pro. Yeah? But you do it in the way that seems like a pro. It's just describing the way you're doing it as kind of with the qualities of this particular noun. We can always use this mitai ni form between some noun and some verb phrase to say that someone or something is doing that verb just like the noun in question. So it always follows this format. It's the noun mitai ni verb format, meaning to do this verb like or like a noun of some kind. We can basically put any noun into this structure and say, oh wow, you're doing that like a whatever. Yeah? And we can also slide any adjective into the end there, and then we create a sentence like this. Nezumi mitai ni shizuka desu. As quiet as a mouse. Alright, so already we can see how many very different ways that we're able to use this mitai form to describe something as like something else, or to describe somebody doing something in the way of something else. By this point, I really think that it should already be very evident how mitai and poi are quite a lot different. Here's one more environment that I want to teach you. It's the mitai na pattern. Using the mitai na pattern, we can actually directly modify nouns, creating a new noun phrase that means something like a thing like this. Let's see this in action. 宿題するみたいな学生がいい成績を取る。ね? Students who do their homework get good grades. Okay, so 宿題するみたいな学生 is our entire noun unit. These are students that do their homework. The mitaina is kind of describing the gakusei as students who are like the kind that do their homework. Ne? And those students, that noun, ga, ii seiseki o toru. Ne? So the kind of verbal phrase here is to get good grades, and our entire noun is students that do their homework, students that seem to do their homework. The mitaina format isn't really getting across the idea of to seem to, but instead it's just describing somebody who does this particular thing in this kind of way, right? Basically, this is always going to follow the standard format of a plain verb plus mitaina noun, or a noun plus mitaina noun, to create a new segment, a bigger noun, and that noun is a noun that is like this, or a noun that does this, or a noun that does things like this. Let's look at an example really quickly that connects two nouns. So, 今日みたいな日がただ寝たいです。What's our noun here? Our entire noun for this sentence is 今日みたいな日. Days like today. And that noun is being described as a day on which ただ寝たいです. I just want to sleep. 今日みたいな日がただ寝たいです. On days like today, I just want to sleep. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? The noun immediately before みたいな is actually your kind of descriptor, right? Well, the full noun is just 日. It's just the day, right? So 今日みたいな日, days like today. That's your entire subject. Okay? And then whatever comes after that is the thing that happens in the case of that entire subject. Okay? So basically, you're creating a situation where your subject, the noun or the verb, immediately before mitai is the category that you're using to describe the noun that comes immediately after the mitai. Just like puppy mitai na sensei, a sensei that is like a puppy. That's me, right? It's just like that. Yeah? So again, you can put anything in this mitai na structure. It could be noun mitai na noun, or it can be verb in the plain present or plain past, mitai na noun. The noun is always going to come after the na, right? Because you're using mitai in this case as an adjective. You're describing that noun as some specific way. Now, there's one final thing that I really need to bring up about mitai, and to me, it's actually slightly controversial. I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't explain this a little bit, but at the same time, I'm not exactly sure that it fully fits into this lesson. Still, we're going to talk about it. You can also use mitai in some cases to describe your desire to do a particular verb. Let's look at this case. This is a pretty standard case, and it's a pretty standard sentence, so it's not like this is, particularly like weird or anything, but this sentence is 日本に行ってみたいです。行ってみたい. Alright, so 日本に行ってみたいです just means I would like to go to Japan. Yeah? Basically, in the situation where you're putting the verb here into the continuative form, right? It's that te form, the continuative form, and then adding mitai after, you have created a sentence where you are expressing your desire to do that verb. Quick point. This can only be used to describe yourself. These are your desires. So when you say 日本に行ってみたいです, you are saying I want to go to Japan. However, you can put any verb into that te form plus the mitai format to talk about something that you want to do, to talk about a desire to do that verb. Okay? So 勉強してみたい. I want to study. 泳いでみたい. I want to swim. 食べてみたい. I want to eat. Okay? So why do I say that this is a little bit controversial? Well, because it's not actually a conjugation, it's the creation of a complex verbal phrase. It's two different verbs, one verb in the continuative and then the mitai being used as a verb afterwards to describe your desire to try to do something. That mitai could actually be a couple different things here, and I've heard it also explained that this is actually an entirely different use case that really is not related to the other uses of mitai that we discussed today. It certainly doesn't mean seems to be or is like or anything like that, and so it totally feels entirely like a different use case 100%, since it's expressing your desire to do that verb and not something like seeming to be like that verb or something like that. Again, as I said before, mitai is very, very, very versatile. I could go on and I could talk more about mitai. We definitely have not covered everything that I could say about mitai, but as an introduction, I think we've explored a lot here. So the focus really here was supposed to be about mitai as being related to it seems like something, or it feels in a particular way. Maybe in the future I'll do a Mitai advanced lesson. I don't know. We'll see. It's probably something that I'm going to cover eventually. But, I don't know. For today, you all get a gold star. I'm super proud of you, and I can't wait to see you next week. Mata ne!